Hello again. This is Dan, Dot Tone Dan, and I am uh, showing you some tips on airbrush rendering in Photoshop using layers. And so on the bottom here, I have basically my solid fills, good clean selections, and then on the top, I have my line art, which I created from another file after I had traced over my sketch, which is initially this right here with some corrections, as you can see. And shadows separate. And then, so these are my solids, and that's my line art up top. Notice I have these locked so that I don't mess with that. So for example, this is locked up here. The line art is solid, 100% solid black. My resolution is, my file resolution is 600, and that is so that I can have crisp, clean, sharp edges and good identical selections. So, and this is it ending up being a left chest print. There's a circle that goes around to this and some type on the sides. It's actually like a Maltese cross in the background, and that's a firefighter's cross. So I'm just running up the line art separately. So I'll put that together. I did start to apply some rendering on the actual solids area, but I know like I could easily come back in and make these selections. And this is how an artist rendering up, creating their own artwork, typically will build their artwork so that they have easy selections. They'll have a solid layer, a line art layer, if they have any line art, and then in between will be all the rendering, all the airbrushing, and that might be even set into a folder. I can hold down the Shift key, activate all of these layers, and then click on folder, and it combines them all into a drop-down folder where you can see all of these. And I could name it rendering. So essentially you want solids, renderings, and your line art. That makes up a good workable file with high resolution and at print size, which this is not. It's double the size. That's fine for me, because I want to use parts of this for later on for other files. And so just to show you a little bit of how rendering happens and how you build up, if you look in here, I've worked with my selection tool, the magic wand tool. I don't normally use magic wand tool unless I'm like selecting in large open areas of solid content like this. And then I could, airbrush on this. And then in doing so, I would add a new layer so that I can work with just the ear, for example, instead of airbrushing on all the other layers, because then I don't get to control it as easily. So, but a little bit more about rendering. If you look on this area, I thought about doing this little tutorial just to. It's not really a tutorial, but it's just a quick thing to show how I do things and how to render up a character pretty quickly, and how to break it apart, because you notice there's little areas in here that are up next to each other, and it's not always just like airbrushing in a one selection. I might use 3 or 4 different layers on this ear here, for example. But notice how I have shadows that come up, up into the recess of the eye. But then I also have this little highlight. So this gray solid is going to act as my midtone. Then I'm utilizing all of this rendering in black because this is a limited color job, and I'm going to try to keep all the colors the same on one layer. And essentially, I'm building up a separation layer of its own. And so I'll have all the black on one layer, all the red on another layer, all the yellow, and so on. And that's all rendering with the airbrush. But notice how I got little highlights in here too. So I use the eraser tool after I airbrush this in. I use the eraser tool, and then I come back in and on that layer, I eat away at that a little bit. I don't have it selected right now, but yeah. Yeah, so I eat away a little bit at it like that. You can come up here and eat away at it like that there, a little bit more, make it soft. But as I come back into, this is like a reflected light, but then up in the shadow, it doesn't reflect as brightly. So you don't want to have it coming up there. That's why you only see it so much down in this area, and kind of looks like that. And then when you reduce down, it looks a little more natural, more curved in. And that reflected light is representative of the light coming off of the eyeball, for example, which I have not rendered yet. But that just gives you an idea of what you want to do. And I typically will, like, if I make a selection on that area and I blow up on it, it is making a sharp, crisp, and clean selection. So if I hide my solids and show my selection, it's getting up right up there solid. That's why when I ink, I'll ink with the pencil tool, and so that I can have hard, sharp, crisp, clean edges. I don't have any fuzzy edges. Fuzzy edges converts to halftone when you rip it. So you'll have dots out here on the edge. You don't want that. And also, when you're building your artwork, it's much better to have hard, sharp, crisp, and clean edges, because if it's fuzzy, for example, let's blur this, for example. I'll go to blur. Can't blur more because I didn't start with a blur yet. Right there. Oh, I have it locked so it's not blurring it. Filter, blur, blur. Somewhere it's supposed to bring up a box to ask me how much do I want to blur it. Maybe I had it selected. I'll try it again. Filter, blur, no box. Well, that's the, or did it? Yeah, it did. Just didn't blur a lot. Gaussian blur. There's my box. It's up on my other screen. So then it asks me how much do I want to blur. So the reason why you can't see anything is because it's blown up really big on there. And now I can zoom back up because I'm in the right area. And as you can see, if I've blurred that even just 1 pixel, it creates this fuzzy, soft edge. But when you go in to make a selection of it, it's not selecting everything. So this is what gives you those halo separations where you got negative shirt color showing through right here, because you made a selection of this and you come over into channels and you filled it, and that's a selection, and then you've come over and you, let's say this is a color, and then you put that there. Well, this is what happens. So you get this selection, and um, gives you this gutter looking space all the way around everything. And who wants that, right? Nobody wants that. So you want hard, sharp, crisp, and clean edges on your line art. And if you don't get your line art provided to you crisp and clean, and it comes in looking like this, and you want to make good selections, we'll just use up in my other window. I'm coming. Hold on. There we go. Just use levels. So you see how that adjusts that slider over all these little ramps here are, this is like solid bright white, and these are your shadows. So on your shadows, if I pull this to the far right, it starts to fill in all the gray data and making that more solid and fatter. Now you've adjusted the appearance of it a little bit. I like to bring this in kind of from both angles, left and right, until I get a decent mid-tone there. And now that's my new line art. And then I can work from that. But let's take this back a few steps so we don't get the blurred. Get my original line art. There. Lock it again, because I don't want to mess with it. Locking is a nice thing that artists will do too. Let's say if this is going to be a, I don't know, a bluish gray. There's my color window. I didn't necessarily prepare everything. We're working on a video on the Cintiq. But let's say it's a kind of a bluish gray. And you want to paint with a hard pencil tool, hard brush. And the reason why you might not see what your brush is doing exactly and see the size of your brush is because lock caps will change that so that you don't see the brush size. I like to see the brush size so that I know that I'm not working on just this when I'm painting, but I'm covering the whole line, for example. And then, I can increase or decrease my brush. But because I have this locked now, I can paint just on the line art and reduce my brush. And this can be one color area. And this is how, for example, the character artists paint Mickey Mouse at Disney. So they'll color in the line art. And they stay away from that a little bit more these days, but that's a whole different story. When I was there, we were coloring the line art. And then you could use another shade and come in and paint this area. Because that area might be a little bit darker, for example, that line art. Let's say we use a straight up gray for the eye in here. And come down and reduce down, just get a little close. And now, even these areas are selectable with the magic wand tool depending on your tolerance. So let's set that down to 5, click that. Now I can click that color or this color or this color. But if I click black, you notice it's going to collect all of that, all of the black in here. So yeah, this is why, and let's say if I click this, then I can use the airbrush tool and shade that a little bit with black up at the top. Yeah. But with this line art, I'm not going to do that with all this character. It's all going to be black. So I'll just type in Option Delete. Oh, make sure it's locked. and then Option Delete or Alt Delete on a PC. And it goes back to all black. So that's a little bit about coloring line work. And then again, you got all of your rendering in here. And those are your flats. So let's render the ear. Okay, so I'll create a new layer. Kind of doesn't matter in the sequence. It's all going to be my black. So up here, I can increase my size. My opacity of my brush is at 20%, and I can come swing by there, and that's going to give me some shadow underneath the hat that he's wearing. And then I can, on another layer, airbrush along the edge here to give it some round shape. And I want to follow the contour of the ear. Blow that up, make it a little softer. And then hide, that would be Control H or Command H on a PC. But that would be hide the selection. So it's still selected. As you see, I could paint in there still. It's still selected, it's just hidden. And now I can reduce down. And so on this layer, I can also come back and use the eraser tool and then make sure that I don't get it too hard too quickly because I want a soft fade. Now I want to shade this area under this little fold that is a little recessed back. So I do that on a new layer. I airbrush it in. And then I can take the eraser tool and then eat away at it where it doesn't overlap into another area that I don't want it to be in. So you see that recessed pretty easily. A little too harsh, everything there for my taste. So if everything's a little too harsh, just turn down the opacity. There you go. This area here, also a little too harsh. Turn down the opacity. There. Excuse me. I'm not going through editing these videos. Too time consuming. If you don't like my coughs in the video, don't watch it. There's also a little dip right here. And I'm going to airbrush it a little bit in there. And come back in and zoom in and come in a little tighter. I'm using the left and right bracket keys in Photoshop to reduce the size of my brush. Now eraser tool and eat away at it. Again, because this layer is active, it's only eating away on what I got on this layer. A lot of artists will render up their characters with no line, no outline, but they do have it outlined, but it's outlined in let me look down in paths. So for this ear, they'll create a new path and they'll come in, and when they draw it, they're just drawing this inner shape and they won't have the black line work, but they'll be drawing a path over top of just their sketch, for example, using that as a guide. Now, my sketch has fatter lines on it, and I knew that I was going to put line art in there, black and white line art. But so this is about how they would do that. And then they would continue this up because this line, they would do that independently from their fill. Make a little bend. That's going to end up matching the line art of the top of the hat. Then they'll make a selection of that, and then they'll do their airbrush on this. Pull that up above, just so you can see it. But again, when you airbrush at a light percentage and airbrush at a big way so you get a nice soft edge there. Then you can come in tight and reduce that down and get that even a little tighter. And as you see, that creates a nice, soft, smooth airbrush effect. And they'll do the whole art file in like this with no line art. And that's why you see crisp, clean, high resolution rendering, very defined rendering with good texture in there. Like maybe somebody from Jeremy Duncan might have done. He works with the pen tool and creates selections. And essentially, that's where you fall into your separations as well with these art files. When the artist is building the artwork, it's so much better. If you have an artist that's working internally in your shop for you, and they're creating artwork like this, it comes out so much better because they control everything. Like I said, crisp, clean, good lines, good selections, good airbrushing. And as they build it, they're separating the artwork with separations in mind, like I'm doing here with all of the black. And then, again, even though I did airbrush on my solids, I could do that because I know I'm going to come back here and have good, clean selections for just my helmet, for example. And then I'll pull all of that onto the black separation. Wand tool, select inside everything that is gray. Again, this looks a little dull because they only want to use a limited number of colors, black, white. They don't know it, but they're going to get a highlight white too. Black, white, red, and yellow. That's the limit of the colors on this left chest. So then I can drop into here and fill that on a selection mask. And then I can copy this gray, drop it onto another one, paste, and I can adjust the levels or curves. Let me pull that in. There's my curves window. And then I could do what I want in here as far as making sure it doesn't fill in too heavily. So this might be my black separation, for example, on the hat itself. And so that's just a little bit about rendering and setting up a file, good clean file for building good artwork and separating good artwork. So I hope you enjoyed that. Have a good day.